Hi there, I'm Ken Cowish from Teletoon Studio. Today I'd like to talk to you about piano triads and voice leading. It's a basic lesson on theory and basic harmony. So why is it good to learn about triads? Triads are really the simplest form of harmony, and by having a good grounding of how triads work, it will allow you to play all kinds of music easier. It is also easier to create more complex harmony later on by using triads in different ways. So by understanding how triads work will be the beginning of actually going to more complex things later on to build on top of the knowledge you know from triads. So basically, what is a triad? A triad is a three-note chord, most commonly created by the first, third, and fifth notes starting on a point of a scale. So if we take a C major scale, and we start on this point, we play the first, third, and fifth, we get what we call a C major triad. Now if we start on the second note and play the first and third from that starting position, so the 2 chord is a D minor. We get what we call the 2 chord, which is a minor chord. So it's important to know that that's a minor chord. We get a minor chord on the 3rd degree too, that's an E minor. We get a major chord, minor, and a diminished. All of those chords are the same order no matter what key you're in. The names of the notes will change for that key you're in, but the order of major, minor, minor, major, major, minor, diminished, that order is true of all major keys. So those are diatonic triads. And what diatonic means is it's within a key. So chromatic triad is something that uses a note outside the key. So as if I was to move this C and move the C up to a C sharp, we will get a chromatic chord because it's using a note it's not considered diatonic just because it's using a note that doesn't belong to C major. And we are only dealing in C major today, so it's easy. The white keys are all going to be diatonic. So what is voice leading? Voice leading is how individual voices in a chord move to other voices in the next chord. So for instance, if I was to play a chord progression with bad voice leading, we get. So with good voice leading, what it means is it sounds more unified. The other thing about voice leading that's so powerful is if you are doing any type of writing or if you are working on vocals, voice leading is actually made to make the parts easier to sing. So each part would have an easier part. So you can hear that the parts going from one voice to the next are easier. So voice leading is a very good tool. So let me talk a little bit about voice leading rules. Again, these rules aren't meant that you have to do them, but they're suggestions. So whenever you're moving from chord to chord and there's notes in both chords, meaning if I'm going from C to F, the C's in both chords. So I keep that C, I don't move it. I don't go up to this one with a high C. I keep the C and I just move that. Same thing if I was moving to a G, there's a G and a G chord and a C, so I keep that G. So that's one rule. Another rule I want to mention is if you're playing a chord where all the notes are different, generally you're going to a chord beside yourself. And what you want to do in that case, again, you don't have to because people do this all the time. I'd probably pick a nice inversion if you're going parallel, but a nice way to go about it is to go in an opposite direction. So when you're moving by step, if you go in contrary motion, you get C, D minor, E minor, F, G, and C. If you're going in the opposite direction, so the bass is going down, the chords would move up. G, F, E minor, D minor, C. So it doesn't mean you have to, but now those aren't necessarily the closest. The idea here is that you're getting not everything going in the same direction. It gives it a little bit more complex sound and more cohesive sound. So with the chords, we have inversion. So what an inversion is when you take one note of the chord and you move it up an octave. So in this C chord, if I play the C up an octave, I get a first inversion. If I take this E up an octave, I get a second inversion. And if I move that G up an octave again, we're back at the top, and that's back to root inversion. So we have 3 inversions. But you can also arpeggiate them. Root, second inversion, first inversion. The root position, the bottom note's the root, the top note is the 5th, and the 3rd's in the middle. Root position is not a great position for moving chords up and down in parallel. And I think it's because the outside note's a perfect 5th. Now, having said that, in modern music this happens all the time. You're going to hear this over and over. So I'm not saying it's bad to do this, but if you can hear the difference if I go to another inversion. That's in first. Now the top note, the melody note's the root. The bottom note is the E. See how that moves nicer? In the second inversion, the 3rd is on top, root's in the middle, the 5th is in the bottom. In notation, root position is going to look like a snowman. So if you see anything that looks like a snowman, it's root position. Now, from moving chords, to play any chord diatonically within the key, the only way to play other chords is by expanding it. So if I take the top voice and raise it, or raise the top 2 voices, I get a different chord. Same with going down, I can lower that voice, the lowest voice, or I can lower both. So I can get, from this root position, I can get 1, 2, 3, 4 different chords. And in every case, to get those other chords, I need to expand moving out. In the first inversion, On notation, it looks like a snowman where somebody knocked his head up. So in first inversion, the top note is a melody note, bottom note is a third, middle note's a fifth. So it's important to know which one's the root so you can always name the chord. So first inversion, the top note is the name of the chord. And to make a new chord, you're either going to contract one note, meaning the notes on the big space where you have the big space, you're going to close that space to make a chord. Or if you're moving two notes, the middle note won't move, and the other notes go down. First inversion, to get to an F, the two notes close the gap to make an F chord. So first inversion to C, the two notes go up and then back. Second inversion, it looks like a snowman, but his pants have fallen down. So if you want to bring his pants back up, you're going to get a different. So in order to change chords again, we have to fill in that space. Or the middle note could come down. It makes a new space, but we're shortening that space. Up a fourth. The two outside notes raise up, the middle note stays the same. So the third and the fifth, the E and the G go up to make the F chord, and then you come back, and then you go back to the C with the outside notes coming down. In second inversion, the other way two notes move is for the two top notes to come down to form a G root position. Now, the fingering is always 1, 3, 5, except for if your thumb is on the third. Whenever your thumb is on the third, your second finger is going to be played in the middle voice. It's just the way our hands work. So in first inversion in your right hand, use your second finger. And this is true in all keys. That's the neat thing. You only have to learn this once. And when you're in second inversion with your left hand, your thumb's going to be on the third, the middle note's the root, and that's going to be your second finger. So it's good to maybe look at different chords and see if you can look quickly to see which one the root is. So remember, snowman, the root's the bottom. Snowman with his head punched up, or the top note's the root. And if it's a snowman with his pants down, it's the middle note that's the root. So that way it's easy to identify. One of the advantages of learning your inversions is when you're sight reading, you start to see the whole group of notes as a pattern or a shape. So you're not actually looking at the individual notes as much as you are recognizing, oh, that's a root position. And you know right away, you know one note, you know where the other notes are. And that's true of all the inversions once you know them. So it will improve your sight reading because you'll be able to see more notes all at once as one thing rather than three separate things. So what type of chords do we have? Well, we've already kind of gone through the major, minor, and diminished by building our scale, but let's take it from a C chord. That's our major chord. The difference between a major and a minor chord is the third. So if we lower the third, we get a minor chord. So that's the difference. So if we want to make a major chord minor, so in this we'll have three major chords. We have an F major. To make it a minor chord, we lower the third. Now that means if you're in this inversion, it's the top note that gets lowered. In this inversion, it's the bottom note that gets lowered. And that is borrowing a note, a chromatic note. So that's not a diatonic chord, although it's a very common chord in C major. It's used a lot. It's a very emotional chord. The Beatles use this chord a lot. It's a great chord to use. And there's your major. G major, lower the bottom. G minor doesn't happen as often, but it's actually a nice sounding. A 5 minor has kind of got a nice sound. It's kind of leaving its function of a dominant chord, which I haven't gotten into that yet. So those are our major chords turned minor. You just lower the middle note. The other way around, if you want to take a minor chord major, you raise the middle note. That's a D major, B minor, E major, E minor, E major, A minor, A major. So that's our minor chords. If we lower the 5th, we get a diminished chord. This chord is very unstable. That's a tritone. It doesn't like to stick around there. That's why the diminished chord is very used. It's always kind of used as a passing chord to make. So that's the one way, and I call that an auxiliary. It works as a little decoration chord. The other way to make a diminished chord is to make the root go up 1. That's going to work as a passing if you're going C to D minor. That's a very common use of diminished chords. That's when it's a passing chord. That's a chromatic chord. Now, a diminished chord is something that we call a symmetrical chord. And a symmetrical chord is built on the same interval, except for, in this case, it's built in minor thirds, but since these are only 3 notes, it's missing the 4th note of the diminished chord, what we call the diminished 7th. So this is just a diminished triad, but since we only have 3, we now have 3 shapes of this diminished, because it's a diminished triad. The next chord I'd like to talk about is an augmented chord. An augmented chord is a major chord, but we raise the 5. That's another chord that's not as stable. Basically, if you were to build what scale it's usually built on is the whole tone scale. A whole tone scale, there's only 2. It either starts on C, 3 white notes, and then up to 3 black notes. This is also a symmetrical chord, meaning all these chords, like a C augmented, E augmented, and G sharp augmented, are all the same chord. We're just changing the root. The other whole tone scale is 2 black notes and these 4 white notes. So there's only 2 whole tone scales in existence, so that makes it easy. There's only 4 augmented chords because you have C augmented, C sharp augmented, D augmented, E flat augmented, and then we've gotten back to where we started. So those are all your augmented chords. Of course, they all have their own inversions. And that sounds very dreamy. So the augmented chord, being unstable, is also a chord that's usually used as a passing chord, or what we call a dominant chord. So in a passing chord, it would be like the C augmented leads up to an A minor. would happen is if you're playing 1, 4, 5, then augmented. Because what that does, it has a nice lead into the... So, augmented chords are neat if you ever want to sound like an avant-garde composer, is play some augmented chords with whole tone scales. And you can build them all over the place. And any pattern you can play. So altered chords are very useful, especially if you play something like jazz. There's a trick I use a lot for teaching guitar because it's so handy to learn all your inversions. On piano, it's a visually easier to see things on the piano than guitar, but it's still an interesting thing. So if I take a C augmented, any note that I'm going to raise, I'm going to get a minor chord, and the note I raise becomes the root. So this C augmented, if I raise the G sharp, I get an A minor. Pretty cool. A minor, first inversion, because the A's on top, C's on the bottom. Go back to the C augmented. If I take the E and I raise that up, I get an F minor, because that's the note I raised, that's the root. That F minor is a second inversion. So in a second inversion, the root's in the middle. Looks like its pants are down on sheet music. If I take the bottom note and raise it, I get a root position C sharp minor. So there's 3 different minor chords, all from the same augmented by altering one note. And I've also learnt 3 chords in 3 different inversions. Isn't that cool? Going the other direction, any note I lower becomes the 5th of a major chord. Same thing, if I take that G sharp and lower it, that's the 5th of a C major chord. The 3rd, if I lower it, that's the 5th of an A flat major chord. And if I lower the C, that's the 5th of an E chord. And notice they're all different inversions. The C is a root position. The A flat is a first inversion chord. And if I lower the C to a B, I get an E major second inversion. So then we have our sus chords. So we have basically 3 sus chords. If it just says sus, it's going to be a sus 4th. And what you do is you take the 3rd note and you move it to the 4th. If you want to make it a sus 2, you move the 3rd to a 2. The 3rd one's not a diatonic chord, but because of how inversions work, I'm going to add it, and this is a sus 7, and that is the root and the 4th, and then we play a 7. Now that might seem totally unrelated, but the interesting is when you start looking at inversions, let's go back to our original C sus chord. Well, if I make the first inversion, put this up an octave, and I go like this, it's now an F sus 2. So it's actually not only changing the bass note, it's changing the whole function from a C sus to an F sus 2. And if I go to the G as the bottom, then I get a G sus 7. So I'm getting 3 very different chords by just inverting them. And they function differently too. So that's an interesting thing. So sus chords are what I kind of think of as They're suspension chords or color chords, auxiliary decoration chords. They want to be resolved, except for in modern music, we're getting used to hearing them like that. So those are our types of chords. So now let's talk about how chords move. So with chord movements, first I'm going to deal with moving in fourths. So that means I'm moving either up 4 notes, like C, D, E, F, or I'm moving down 4 notes. Whenever you're moving up a fourth, the 2 top notes, the 3rd and the 5th, are going to move up 1 up the scale, and the root isn't going to move. And that's true in all inversions. So in every case, the root doesn't move, the other 2 notes go up. That's how we go up a fourth. And that's true of all chords. If I start on D minor, and I want to go up for 4 to a G, the top voices go up. Now he's voice leading. Same in this. The root doesn't move. Here the root's in the middle, so it's the outside. So if I wanted to make a little chord progression like that, I could go D minor, G, C, F, B diminished. Now we get an E minor, but I'm going to raise this, and I'll explain later why, because that resolves better to the A minor. So this is a very common, especially in jazz, but all kinds of music uses this cycle. Your ears are probably used to hearing it over and over. You expect what's coming next. D minor is what we would call the 2 of a C key of C. G is the 5. Now the G, little thing, if I want to make this into a 7, you take the root and you just replace it with the note below it. I'll talk more on this later. So that we can get a C to a G7, to a C, to an F, to a B diminished, to an E, and we're going to raise the G to a G sharp. So that's a chromatic note, and then we end on A minor. In every, if you change positions. So if I'm going C and I want to go down a fourth, in this case the G doesn't, the 5th, it doesn't move, and the other notes, and that's because it's part of the G chord. And the other notes go down. True in all cases, in all inversions. So a piece that's really good to practice for this is Pachelbel's canon. And Pachelbel's canon it actually has a sequence. It goes down a fourth, then it goes up a tone, up 1 note of the scale. Then it goes down a fourth, up a note, down a fourth. It goes back up a fourth, up a tone, and starts over. So it's here's the sequence. You have C, scale. If you ever want to start improvising, if you play this with your left hand, sequence, anything you play in this part of it, you can just keep doing it. Now that's where the sequence ends, because now it doesn't go up a tone, it goes up a fourth. It's kind of like the answer. Again, these rules are loose, but in a sequence, 3 is the magic number. 2 is not enough to really make it a sequence. Once you get to 4, it starts to get boring. So most sequences tend to be 3 in groups of 3s. So Pack-and-Bell canon, there's 1 sequence, 2 sequences, 3 sequences, and then an answer. Or you can just improvise. In this, the top 2 voices are just going down a scale and back up. And that's an interesting point, because in harmony, things that move in parallel, the most common, in fact, really the acceptable ones in traditional classical harmony, are thirds and sixes. That's what sounds nice moving. And a third and a six are inversions. If I take a third and I move it down an octave, I get a 6. So I can play Pack-and-Bell's canon in thirds. Or in sixes. But the other line that is happening would be playing the 5, and the 5 turns into a root. Then you go down a third, play the 5, turns into a root on the E minor. You go down a third, it becomes the 5th of an F. Then it plays this root of the C, 5th of an F. So those are your voice leading moves using thirds, sixes. Now there's also going from moving chords in thirds. So if we're moving down a third, here's an interesting thing. So if I'm going from C and I want to go down 2 notes to A minor, the 5th raises. So remember, it expands, and notice that it's going in the opposite direction as the bass. C, A minor, and all the inversions. That's why it's good to know where your root, third, and 5th are, because now all these things will become second nature. When you're practicing it, you have to really think about it. But once you know it, you never think about it. You just play it. See? So notice it's going again in different directions. So that's one thing to notice, and that's another neat thing about moving in thirds. You're almost always changing the type of chord. This goes back to the intervals. If any interval you invert, if it's a major 6, it becomes a minor 3rd. And if it's a minor 6, it becomes a major 3rd. And not only that, they kind of have the same type of tension. That's true of all intervals. It's true of seconds. So if I have a minor 7th, if I go up an octave, it becomes a major 2nd. Minor 7th, a major 7th, becomes a minor 2nd, and again their qualities are shared. Because really it's the same thing inverted, so it's going to have a similar quality. We're going down. So if I'm going from a major and I go down a third, it's C major to A minor. Same if I'm in F major. If I go down to a D, it's a D minor. Again, the 5th has to go up. If I'm going to G and I'm going to E minor, it's the fifth that goes up. And all those chords are kind of linked together because C major and A minor is the relative minor. With F, the D minor is its relative minor, and with G major, E minor is its relative. So they're all doing similar things. If I'm to go up from C up to an E minor, well then it's different. Now the bottom note, the root, is the one that goes, and it goes again in the opposite direction. As one's going up, the bass is going up, the root's going down to become the fifth of an E minor. C major, E minor. Same in every inversion. It's the top note in this inversion. In first inversion, the top note comes down to root position E minor, and it's the fifth of that. In second inversion, the root is in the middle, so that's the one that moves. So here I could play a little chord progression. C, A minor, F to D minor, B diminished to G major, E minor to C major. C, A minor, F, D minor, B diminished, G, E minor, C. All of that, we've all just going down in thirds. So that's one way you get good at something, is by playing it over and over. So there you have. And that's covered every single note in the scale. So those are all your possibilities. You've practiced them all. Now what about having thirds go up? With thirds going up, and also notice it goes from a D minor to F major to A minor to C major to E minor to G to B diminished, C. And what if we want to move in step? You don't have to. We can go up like this. But if we're going in the opposite direction, C, D minor, E minor, F, G, C. C, D minor, E minor, F, G, C. Now you can vary it and sometimes go up this way, and then maybe the second time do it the other way. Just for variety. Let's do one going down, but this time we're going to be in A minor. So we're going to start on an A minor, go down to a G, but notice I'm making the inversion go up. And then now I've made this an E7, and the reason why is because it really sounds, if I had an E minor, you'd get this. Pretty uninteresting, but this, that's the gravity of the music. So let's look at minor harmony. When you're dealing with things in minor, it's the same. You'll notice if you take the natural minor scale, it's all the same chords that are in the C major. But because remember I told you this E minor is not they raise the seventh, and that's why we have a harmonic minor scale. Now, it's easy to get confused with minor scales because of the altered notes. But I find the easiest way to think about it is only worry about that raised note when you're playing the 5 chord. Because that's the only reason for that raised note. It's just so you can get that. Because if you're playing on the 1, you don't need that note. In fact, it's a high tension. Even on the 4 chord. But it's on the 5 chord that it sounds good. And we have a melodic minor, and the melodic minor raises 2 notes. But the only reason they made the melodic minor is it was difficult, again, for voice leading. It's hard for singers to sing this interval. Unless it's in their ear. And it also, in older times, it was a pretty jarring sound. Now our ears are tuned to it, where it still sounds ethnic, but it's not all that foreign to our ears. Especially if you listen to different types of music. Important thing about all this inversion talk, we've been talking a lot about inversions, but really, the bass player trumps everything. So if you're playing with a bass player, it doesn't matter what you're playing, any inversion, it goes back to the bass player. So you might want to think of these inversions for playing melodies, because really it's what your left hand is doing that creates the bass. So one good way to do that is to harmonize the major scale. So what I'm going to do, and what I'm doing is I'm putting the melody on top. So the major scale is just... So for the C, I'm playing a C chord. I find that for the D, the G works the best. And I go... Now this is first inversion C, but you'll notice I'm playing second inversion on the right hand. It's the bass that's making it first inversion. But I want that melody note, and that melody note is in the second inversion. Then I play F. Again, it's a root position F, but the triad in the top, I'm playing the second inversion. I'm playing the first inversion, excuse me. And then I go to the G chord, which I'm playing a C. And it's an F over A. Again, it's just the bass that's making it F over an A. And then a G over B to C. Now, this type of harmonizing is going to make you sound very much like a hymn. In fact, Joy to the World is just going down the scale, so I can harmonize it with these. So really these triads help you play melody as much. It's your left hand or the bass player that's creating the inversions. Okay, let's talk about bass movement. The root's the most important thing for the bass player. So, and it's good to maybe add a rhythm to it. If you change chords. The fifth is the most stable note, and you'll recognize it as the pa sound. Thirds don't work as good. You'll notice a third, you can do it. There's no rule against it, but you're going to hear the difference. This is much stronger. Thirds are good if you want to go to the next chord, especially the fourth, because hear that, it wants to go there. To do a walking thing, just up and down the triads. With all these walking talking things, the important thing to pay attention is that on the 1, you play a root, and on the 3, you play a 5, because you're getting this. You're just putting a note in between it. So it's still very strong. If you want to keep on going up, the note to add is the 6, just because it's the best passing note. To go both directions, you just repeat the octave and come down. And you want to learn that in other chords. Now that can be played straight, or it can play with a swing, and a swing is uneven. It's like 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. That'll sound more bluesy. The only difference is rhythm. Rhythm is such a part of music, you don't want to forget about the rhythm. Now, if it's more of a boogaloo type song, this would be a straight rhythm. Another very common reason for bass to make different inversions is going down things by step. For instance, you might have, now it would sound funny if I just played the chords like this. So often they'll play inversions to make the harmony interesting. There's the B over E minor, A minor, C with G in the bass, F. That's another common thing. So that's some things to think about when you're adding bass. Now, what if you want to play triads over a pedal? A pedal is a note that just sustains. So if I want to play notes over a pedal, I can hold this. I'm going to do this all over C. The primary chords, or all the major chords of C, work really good for this. So C, then F with C in the bass, and then C with G in the bass, then back to the F. Bands like Genesis did this all the time. So those are common. Another one is the flat 7. B flat, F over C, C. And what puts it all together is that pedaling note. B flat over C, F over C to C. Or A flat over C, B flat over C to C. Coming from the other direction, a nice one is coming down. You play C, then over E minor, it makes the major 7. And then an E flat major, D, D flat, C. Now even though you play E minor, E flat, D major, D flat, the truth of it is, the real chords are C, C major 7, C minor 7, D7 over a C, D flat major 7 over a C. C is the 7 of both D and D flat to a C. And with all these, you can change inversions. triad and convert a triad into a 7 chord? Well, it's pretty simple. You just take the root and you lower it a step. So a C, if I lower the root, I get a C major 7. A D minor, if I lower the root, I get a D minor 7. It's like playing an F over C. Now the nice thing about this is it's much easier to play a triad, and remember, we've been practicing. You want to practice all these. You want to practice your inversions a lot because you can use them over and over, and it makes it easier. So if I'm playing a C major 7, I can just hold the C with my bass. I don't have to think about 4 notes, and I've practiced my minor triads. It's easier. F major 7 is F over A minor. So you can even go up like this, and these are all your scales. So going up in 7s, and this is true of all keys, the first chord is a major 7, second chord is minor 7, major 7, dominant 7, because the F is a full tone below. To make a G a major 7, you'd have to play an F sharp. Same thing if I want to make an F major 7, a F7, I have to lower it to an E flat. G7 is over with a B diminished. The 5 chord's a 7 chord, 6 is a minor 7, the 7 is a minor 7 flat 5. Don't worry, it sounds confusing, but it's one of the chords and your ears have heard it lots. And there's your C major 7. So if I was to take all those from just in the key of C, so all the 7 chords you can break down into a triad. So a major 7 is a minor chord on the 3rd, so it's a C with an E minor on top. A C7 is a C with an E diminished. So if you go up to the 3rd of the chord and play diminished, there's your 7 chord. If I want to play a C minor 7, I play an E flat. There's C minor 7. If I want to play a C minor 7 flat 5, I play E flat minor over a C. If I want to play a C diminished 7, so I play a E flat diminished. There's my C diminished 7. A C minor major 7, great chord if you want to have something dark. There's your E flat augmented. Now this usually is a passing note, like so you set up the tension. By itself it has more tension, but sometimes you want some tension. And the C sus, one of my favorite, is you play the triad a tone below. So a B flat over C, that's your we've added a 9 there too, just because it sounds nice. This is what, and this, you don't have to resolve, but you can. And it sounds nice going from chord to chord. Okay, so those are turning your triads into 7 chords. Very handy. What if you want to decorate your triads? Well, you can just use chords close. So common things is sus chords. So if you're playing C, you can go to the sus. You can even do that on a minor chord. It changes different. People like me will know Supertramp song. That's just doing it on A minor to an F. Now this by itself would sound like a pretty tense, but in context, it's just decorating it. Another thing is using the C6 chord. That's just the 5th chord up. Or you can use the major 7. You can even use the major 7 and go down to the 6. You could play a C to an F chord. C down to a B flat. You can play a C diminished. You can play a C to a D minor. Now all these are subjective and will work differently depending on what song you're doing. So those are decorating triads. Often, like if you're playing like a blues, like that's diminished. Scott Joplin uses that a lot. That's the sour crouch I showed in my Joplin video. That's the diminished sound. Sounds nice going to the F too. Chromatic thirds, the minor thirds or major 6s. And then once you get there, you have to go down. That's where it goes diatonically. So if you go the root and the 3rd, then you go to the 2nd one, and the rest are all chromatic. And with the 6s, decorating chords. So I hope this is something that was helpful to you. Everything here I'm going to try to put on my link to my Google Drive with PDF files. So check out that link and then you can print out these things. I'm going to go out with a little improvisation on all the things I've been talking about. And I don't know what I'm going to play. But it's going to be based on triads. Fun with triads.